Imagine sitting down for a quiet meal only to be suddenly refused service. And then the unthinkable happens. 911 is called. That's exactly what occurred at a small diner when a waitress turned away a veteran and escalated the situation in the most shocking way. But why did this happen? What led to such an extreme action? In this video, we're diving deep into the incident that has sparked outrage across the country. We'll reveal the lesser-known details behind the waitress's shocking decision, the real story from the veteran's perspective, and the unexpected fallout that followed. Stick around to the end to discover the surprising twist that no one saw coming. Welcome to Craze TV, where we bring you the most compelling and dramatic stories that will leave you questioning what you thought you knew. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. It was a quiet morning at a small diner tucked away on a corner of a sleepy street, the kind of place where locals gather for their daily breakfast, where the coffee is always hot and the conversation, though soft, is filled with the familiarity of regulars. The clinking of plates and silverware echoed in the background, blending with the low hum of chatter between the few patrons who filled the cozy booths. A veteran, recently returned from service, stepped inside. His uniform, faded from wear, still carried the weight of his years on the front lines. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen and experienced more than most could imagine. Yet there was a sense of calm in his demeanor, a desire for a simple meal away from the chaos he'd left behind. He found an empty booth near the window, pulling the door closed behind him, and slid into the seat. Outside, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the street. Inside, everything seemed perfectly ordinary, until the waitress walked up to his table. There was no sign of any tension yet, just the soft murmur of the diner, the smell of sizzling bacon, and the comfort of the familiar. But something wasn't right. This man wasn't just any ordinary diner customer. He had served in the military for over a decade, dedicating his life to a cause greater than himself. His uniform, though worn and faded, carried the weight of countless experiences, battles fought, friendships lost, and the countless hours spent away from home. He had seen things most people couldn't begin to understand. His body bore the scars of those years, each mark telling a story of survival, of moments where his life had hung by a thread. But it wasn't just his physical scars that shaped him. The emotional toll was far deeper. The things he had witnessed in war never truly left him. The quiet moments often became the loudest reminders, the sounds of a world that had moved on while he had remained stuck in memories he couldn't escape. He had returned home recently, trying to reintegrate, to find a sense of normalcy in a world that felt foreign to him now. His presence in the diner that day was simple, just the desire for a warm meal and a bit of peace. There was nothing extraordinary about him, just a man trying to heal from wounds that would never fully fade. Yet in that moment, his simple need for a meal would soon clash with something much darker. As the veteran settled into his booth, the atmosphere in the diner seemed to shift. The waitress, moving between tables with the practiced ease of someone who had worked here for years, paused when she saw him. Her steps slowed, and her eyes narrowed slightly. For a brief moment, it was as if time stood still. She hesitated, her gaze lingering on him with a subtle, almost imperceptible tension. Her face tightened as she studied him, as though she were trying to place him, or perhaps deciding whether he belonged there. There was no warmth in her expression, no usual friendliness. Instead, her eyes seemed guarded, distant, like she had already made up her mind about him before he'd even said a word. Something felt off, but the veteran didn't notice at first. He simply sat back, hands resting on the table, trying to relax in the familiarity of the diner. He had no reason to suspect anything unusual. The waitress continued to watch him, her discomfort growing. Her movements became more stiff, more deliberate, as she began to walk toward his table, but her steps were heavier now, filled with uncertainty. Something was happening beneath the surface, something the veteran didn't see coming. Without a word, the waitress finally reached his table. Her footsteps were quiet, but they carried an undeniable weight, as though each one was pushing the tension closer to its breaking point. As she stood over him, her eyes were cold, like they had been frozen by something she could not or would not understand. There was no hint of kindness in her gaze, no recognition of his service, just an unsettling chill that seemed to surround her. The veteran looked up at her, his expression confused, expecting the usual greeting or perhaps a quick menu offer, but instead, her voice cut through the air, sharp and unwavering. "We can't serve you," she said, her tone firm and final. The words hung in the air like a slap. The veteran's face went pale, his eyes searching hers for any sign that this was a joke, some kind of misunderstanding, but there was nothing. Her face remained set, her stance unyielding. She didn't explain, didn't offer an apology, just stood there, her arms crossed as if she had already made her decision. He was taken aback, stunned by the suddenness of it all. What had he done? Why was he being refused? His mind raced, but no answers came. It felt unjust, the kind of unfairness that left a bitter taste in your mouth, the kind that made you question if you were seeing things clearly. The veteran sat frozen for a moment, his mind struggling to catch up with what was happening. Confusion washed over him like a wave, leaving him unsure of how to react. This wasn't how he expected his morning to go. He looked up at the waitress, trying to make sense of the coldness in her voice, the hostility in her stance. "Why?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I'm just here for a meal. I haven't done anything wrong." His words hung in the air, desperate, as if he could somehow reason his way out of this absurd situation. He had been through countless hardships in his life, yet nothing had prepared him for this, being turned away without explanation. His hands tightened around the edges of the table, a futile attempt to steady his shaking fingers. But the waitress didn't flinch. She remained unmoved, her eyes colder than before. There was no sign of empathy, no attempt to listen to his side. Instead, she pulled out her phone, her fingers quickly dialing, without a single word of explanation. "Please," he said again, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need some peace." But it was clear she had already made up her mind. The phone call was already in progress. The veteran's heart sank. He couldn't understand it. This wasn't just a refusal of service. It felt personal. But why? What had he done to deserve this? In a shocking move, the waitress's fingers hovered over her phone before she quickly punched in the numbers. The sound of the 911 operator's voice filled the quiet space between them. "I need police assistance," she said, her voice steady and flat, as if she had done this many times before. "There's a man here, and he's being disruptive." The veteran's heart skipped a beat. Disruptive? He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't caused any trouble. He was simply sitting in a diner, trying to enjoy a quiet moment. His eyes widened in disbelief, his throat tightening as the weight of what was happening began to settle in. His face turned pale, a mixture of confusion and shock flooding his mind. How had things escalated this far? He wasn't a threat. He wasn't causing a scene. Yet here she was, on the phone with the police, making a claim that could have serious consequences. In that moment, it wasn't just about the meal he had wanted. It wasn't even about the refusal of service. It was about the sudden, unjust label being placed on him, the complete misjudgment of his intentions. The room felt colder now, the sounds of the diner fading into the background as the tension soared. He had never imagined that something so simple could spiral so quickly into something so dangerous. The veteran's voice was shaky, but he tried to remain calm as he spoke to the dispatcher. "I'm just here to eat," he explained, his words slow and deliberate, hoping to convey the absurdity of the situation. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just wanted a quiet meal, nothing more." He paused, listening to the dispatcher's questions, but the tension in his chest only grew. He could hear the disbelief in his own voice, but the reality of the call was sinking in. The waitress had already dialed for help, and the situation was out of his hands now. "I'm not causing trouble," he added, his voice quieter now, almost resigned. "I've been here before. many times. I don't understand why she's doing this. The dispatcher kept speaking, but the veteran barely heard the words. His mind was racing. What had gone wrong? What was the real reason the waitress had refused to serve him? Was it something about him? Something he didn't understand? Something he couldn't see? Or was there something deeper at play here? His thoughts swirled, but the cold reality remained. The call had already been made. The damage was done. And now, he was left wondering why a simple meal had turned into something much more complicated, something far more personal than he ever could have imagined. News of the incident spread quickly, like wildfire. Within hours, the story had made its way through social media, sparking a wave of outrage. People were shocked by what had transpired in that small diner, struggling to understand how such an ordinary situation could escalate so drastically. As posts, tweets, and news articles circulated, the public's reaction was swift and strong. Many took to social media to demand justice for the veteran, expressing their disbelief at how someone who had served his country could be treated so unfairly. "This is wrong," one tweet read. "How could anyone do this to a hero?" The calls for accountability grew louder, with people questioning not just the waitress's actions, but the deeper motives behind them. Some wondered if the waitress's refusal to serve the veteran had been influenced by bias or personal prejudice. Was it because of his appearance? They asked. His military background? Did she judge him based on something she saw? Something that wasn't even true? The conversation quickly turned from the incident itself to the larger issue of how people are treated based on assumptions, misunderstandings, or stereotypes. As the story continued to unfold online, the veteran's story was shared across platforms, creating a wave of support from strangers who felt compelled to stand by him. The incident had reached far beyond the walls of the diner, igniting a debate that would last long after the news cycle moved on. Authorities quickly launched an investigation into the incident. They interviewed both the veteran and the waitress, trying to piece together what had actually happened that morning. The diner itself was scrutinized, with many wondering how a simple misunderstanding could spiral so out of control. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the situation had been blown out of proportion, with the waitress's actions being questioned from every angle. In the days that followed, the diner issued a public apology, acknowledging the mistake and expressing regret for the way the veteran had been treated. They claimed they would be taking steps to ensure something like this would never happen again. But despite the apology, the damage had already been done. The veteran's dignity had been stripped away in an instant, and no amount of public apology could erase the hurt he had experienced. The story of what happened that morning touched the hearts of many. The veteran, once a symbol of strength and resilience, had become a symbol of injustice. His story was shared across the nation, with many rallying behind him in support. People began to reflect on how easily one person's actions could hurt another, and how vital it was to treat everyone with fairness and respect. Though the incident was over, its impact lingered. The veteran's quiet struggle had become a powerful reminder of the importance of kindness, empathy, and the need to stand up for what's right. And for many, the story served as a call to action, to be more aware of how we treat one another, especially those who have already sacrificed so much. In the end, this incident serves as a powerful reminder that respect for all individuals, regardless of their background or appearance, is essential. It highlights how easily one person's actions can spiral out of control when the wrong choices are made, and how those choices can affect not just one life, but the lives of many. We may never fully understand why this situation unfolded the way it did, but it teaches us an important lesson about fairness, empathy, and the responsibility we all share to treat each other with dignity. Thank you for watching. If you found this story thought-provoking, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories. Stay tuned for more, and remember, respect is a choice we all must make every day.